when news broke that King Charles had issued an emergency royal decree granting Catherine, Princess of Wales, temporary ruling powers, the monarchy and the nation stood stunned. This wasn't just ceremonial, this was authority, real, immediate, and unprecedented. What led to this covert decision, and why now? Behind Buckingham's locked doors, a storm had already been brewing. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The announcement did not come with royal fanfare. It did not arrive through an official press conference or elegant procession. It broke with a jarring BBC interruption. Regular programming suddenly cut with an alert that sent ripples through every corner of Britain. A royal correspondent, visibly shaken, confirmed what no one expected. King Charles had signed a classified order transferring temporary ruling powers to Catherine, not to William, not to the Council of State, but to the Princess of Wales herself. And that alone shattered decades of precedents in an instant. Moments before the broadcast, witnesses claim Catherine was spotted leaving Sandringham, her face unreadable, her pace uncharacteristically brisk. Her early departure, shrouded in silence, would soon prove prophetic. What followed were 72 hours of mounting intensity. Helicopters hovered above Clarence House. High-ranking officials were seen entering through the palace's lesser-used eastern gate, always a signal that something critical was underway. Doors shut, phones confiscated. No one spoke on the record. But inside, a power shift was underway, one that would blindside even the monarchy's inner circle. Despite the official line insisting Charles was well and focused, rumours erupted almost immediately about the king's deteriorating health. Some claimed a private physician had arrived the day before, under royal seal. Others suggested this had less to do with health and more to do with control. Then came the leak. A junior aide, panicked and overwhelmed, reportedly slipped a document to a close friend in the press. Within hours, the media storm had ignited, and with it came a cascade of consequences no one seemed prepared to face. Senior royals, caught off guard, scrambled for clarity. Parliament, blindsided, demanded a statement. A public already suspicious of the palace's silence began speculating wildly. Was this a constitutional crisis masked as a temporary measure? Or was something darker unfolding behind the gold-trimmed doors of Buckingham Palace? Tension swirled not just in the press rooms but in private residences. Senior royals cancelled scheduled appearances. Charles and Camilla were nowhere to be seen. And Catherine, she was reportedly in back-to-back briefings with senior advisors. Not once, but twice. Black government cars were seen outside her Kensington residence well past midnight. And each time the blinds remained drawn. As the country held its breath, the one thing that became increasingly clear was this. This was no ordinary delegation of duty. This was a seismic moment in royal history, a shift not in ceremony, but in power itself, a carefully orchestrated act or a desperate reaction to forces spiraling beyond control. And yet, as the headlines blazed and the whispers grew louder, the public began to sense that this was merely the surface. As the world reels, whispers of a deeper royal rift begin to emerge, one that didn't start this week but decades ago. What could push a reigning monarch to temporarily hand over his power not to the heir, but to his daughter-in-law? Inside sources reveal a haunting build-up of private letters, family disputes, and a power vacuum that began. Long before the cameras rolled, the turning point came in the form of a closed-door confrontation between King Charles and Prince William, one laced with emotion, unresolved grief, and bitter truths that had been buried for far too long. Reports from within the palace suggest it was less a conversation and more a reckoning. William, who had long walked the line between duty and disillusionment, finally voiced what many had only whispered: that the institution, in its current state, was bleeding from within, that without decisive leadership, the cracks in the crown would no longer be hidden by tradition. Charles, faced with the weight of his son's words, was said to have stood in silence for an agonizing length of time, unable to respond not out of defiance, but fear, a fear that he too knew the truth of what William spoke. Camilla, however, was notably absent from this defining exchange, and that absence was no coincidence. Sources close to the matter reveal that Charles made a calculated choice to exclude her from the final deliberations, not out of cruelty but necessity. Trust, once so carefully extended, had begun to fracture behind palace walls. Camilla's influence, while powerful in public image, had lost traction among key advisors who viewed her presence as more performative than pragmatic. A decision was made in shadows, one that stripped her of input, during the most consequential moment of her husband's reign. Meanwhile, an unsettling document arrived under red seal at Charles's personal residence, a private health report, one which, though never released publicly, reportedly urged immediate reduction of stress and responsibility. Though palace representatives denied any deterioration in the king's condition, insiders claim the document's tone was dire, and perhaps it was the final spark. Faced with physical vulnerability and emotional strain, Charles had to choose between clinging to legacy or preserving the very institution he swore to uphold. That choice did not come easily. His council of advisors was deeply divided. Some argued that William, as heir, was the rightful steward of any temporary authority. Others insisted that such a move would ignite too many comparisons to Charles himself during the Diana-era comparisons that would reopen national wounds. It was Catherine's name, whispered at first and then spoken with increasing conviction, that ultimately rose above the din. She was viewed not only as unifying and capable, but more importantly untainted by the royal blood feuds still smouldering in secret. And then, like a flame reigniting old embers, a familiar rivalry resurfaced. Princess Anne and Queen Camilla, whose uneasy coexistence had long been buried beneath royal decorum, found themselves at ideological war once more. Anne, ever the pragmatist, supported the Catherine solution without hesitation. Camilla, blindsided and betrayed, protested in private, but her voice, it seemed, no longer carried the weight it once did. The advisory board, now fractured into factions, quietly rallied behind Anne's cold logic. Stability required Catherine. Perhaps the most unnerving revelation, however, came from deep within the royal archives, where notes attributed to the late Queen Mother were reportedly unearthed. Notes that spoke of future women of the crown, their resilience, and one chilling line that, according to a former aide, read, "It may one day fall to her not by birth, but by fire." Charles reportedly spent hours alone with the document before finalizing his decree. That night, the order was drafted, but before this decree ever reached the press, its roots were entangled in decades of strategy, rivalry, and the shadow of another woman, Princess Diana. Insiders claim King Charles made his decision in front of a priv. 8 portrait of Diana. The haunting resemblance between Diana and Catherine has long stirred speculation, but could it now be influencing the very foundations of power? That moment standing in silence before the image of the woman who once defined the emotional soul of the monarchy was not one of nostalgia. It was confrontation, a reckoning with legacy. Because Diana's presence, though long absent in body, has never truly faded from the corridors of power. Her letters, uncovered in recent years and privately circulated among the royal archives, speak of a monarchy she believed must evolve or fall. In her own hand, she envisioned a future where empathy, accessibility, and modern sensibility ruled alongside duty. That vision, buried in grief and politics for decades, seemed to stir again with stunning force through the rise of Catherine. The Princess of Wales, much like her late mother-in-law, carried herself not with entitlement, but with something more dangerous to the establishment: authenticity. And it was this authenticity that began to echo through Charles's mind like a ghost refusing to be silenced. Sources close to the monarch say that William's words during their recent confrontation were not just persuasive, they were piercing. "You knew what she wanted," he told his father, voice steady but laden with unhealed wounds. "You knew it then, and you know it now." That sentence reportedly hung in the room long after William left. It wasn't just about the monarchy's direction. It was about memory, about guilt, about a promise unspoken and perhaps never fulfilled. And in that silence, Charles is said to have whispered, almost to himself, she would have chosen her. The room, the throne, the crown suddenly all felt different, not because of politics, because of Diana. Camilla, though never officially told the full truth of Charles's inner turmoil, felt its consequences. He Night before the decree was made public, a memorial service was held in quiet observance of Diana's birth anniversary. Camilla attended, but observers noted her distance, physical, emotional, symbolic. She stood near Catherine, yet worlds apart. And when the choir sang one of Diana's favorite hymns, Camilla's hands trembled. It was not grief, it was fear. Fear that Diana's legacy was no longer a shadow, but a living influence. An influence now embodied in the woman the crown was slowly gravitating toward. What sealed the moment wasn't the service, however. It was what Charles had seen the night before. A former archivist, long loyal to the Queen Mother, had reportedly shared with Charles a segment of forgotten footage, private video, from Diana's time at Kensington, unreleased to the public. In it, she speaks candidly of the kind of woman who should one day stand beside the sovereign, not someone who merely followed tradition, but someone who inspired transformation. It was raw, unscripted, unforgettable, and it stirred something deep within the king, an aching need to right what history had bent. And yet, this decree was more than sentiment. It was strategy, a strategy that shook Camilla's standing to its core. Camilla had fought decades for royal legitimacy, only to be sidelined in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. As Catherine is quietly escorted into private strategy rooms, Camilla is nowhere in sight, and the silence is deafening. When the news finally reached her, it was already too late. Palace insiders confirmed that Camilla was informed of King Charles's decree a mere 20 minutes before the leak hit the press. 20 minutes to digest the fact that her husband, the man she had stood beside through scandal, reform and coronation, had made the most consequential royal decision in years, and had done so without including her. There was no meeting, no private explanation, no warning. Only a tightly worded briefing, delivered by a palace aide who seemed just as uncomfortable delivering it as she was hearing it. What followed was a cascade of disbelief, rage, and perhaps most devastating of all, silence from Charles himself. Within hours, her private secretary handed in a resignation, citing irreconcilable differences with the direction of palace leadership. The corridors of Windsor echoed not with the bustle of state preparation, but the quiet chaos of a monarchy realigning itself without her, and the one person who had fought the hardest to be seen not as a consort, but as a queen in her own right, now found herself a ghost in her own court. Sources claim Charles refused multiple requests from Camilla for a personal audience that day. No explanations, no reassurances, just locked doors and whispered apologies from staff too shaken to offer more. It was in one of these corridors, cold, narrow, and absent of ceremony, where the inevitable happened. A tense, wordless standoff between Camilla and Catherine. Neither raised a voice. They didn't need to. Catherine, recently ushered into the realm of high-state consultation, merely paused, nodded politely, and continued walking. Camilla remained frozen. In that single moment, it became clear that power had shifted not with malice, but with finality, and that finality cracked something deep within the Queen Consort. Her closest aide, a woman who had served her loyally through the chaos of her public rehabilitation, was seen later that evening exiting Windsor in tears. Her exit, though quiet, symbolized a deeper fracture, one between Camilla and the inner mechanisms of a monarchy that now viewed her presence not as essential, but optional. Attempts to block the decree had reportedly been made earlier in the week, with Camilla reaching out to longtime allies in the advisory BO. But her influence, once strong, had thinned. One source bluntly stated, by the time she tried to stop it, the ink had already dried. Still, it wasn't the exclusion that haunted her most, it was the symbolism. After all these years clawing her way out of scandal, remaking her image, earning acceptance from a skeptical public, Camilla found herself displaced by a woman who didn't ask for power, but was handed it on trust. A woman whose rise echoed a name Camilla could never erase. But as Camilla faced her own reckoning, the public's reaction was just as telling and just as divided. Social media exploded. Protesters gathered, supporters cheered, and Buckingham Palace's phone lines were flooded within hours. The UK hadn't seen such confusion since the abdication of Edward VIII. But this time, the future of the monarchy was in the hands of a woman no one expected, In the space of a single afternoon, a nation built on centuries of royal tradition was thrust into a digital, divisive firestorm. The hashtags arrived like thunderclaps, hashtag Queen Catherine, trending globally within hours, followed closely by hashtag What About William, a phrase that quickly became a symbol of constitutional confusion. In living rooms and parliaments, pubs and political circles, the same question echoed, why her, and why now? The absence of explanation only deepened the storm. While the media scrambled for palace reactions, it was clear that something unprecedented had taken place, something bigger than protocol, deeper than tradition. It was a rupture. .br in ID Westminster. Tensions soared. Parliamentarians clashed publicly, some declaring the decree an act of visionary modernism, others calling it outright overreach. Legal analysts were paraded across television screens, debating the limits of royal prerogative. Could Charles truly delegate sovereign powers in such a sweeping fashion? And if so, why bypass? The heir. The lack of clarity from the palace only added to the frenzy, and it was soon revealed that Catherine had already taken private calls with senior ministers twice in a single day. While William remained out of sight, his wife had stepped directly into the heart of power, and not behind the scenes either. She was being briefed, she was listening, she was leading. Then came the report that truly startled the establishment. Charles, according to internal correspondence leaked to a foreign outlet, would be unreachable for an undisclosed period. No formal leave of absence, no appearance scheduled, just silence. It was as though the crown had slipped into hibernation and left Catherine to wear its weight without ceremony or crown. The response from other parts of the United Kingdom was immediate. Scotland's First Minister called for clarity and legal transparency. Wales's government released a pointed statement demanding assurance that devolution agreements would be respected. The pressure wasn't just building in London, it was fracturing across the realm. And then came the palace's official response, a 3-line statement devoid of warmth or reassurance. It confirmed the decree, it acknowledged Catherine's role, and it made no mention of William, Camilla, or the king's condition. The coldness of the release did not calm the storm, it fanned the flames. Outrage deepened. Support intensified. The nation was cleaved in two, those who saw Catherine as the rightful steady hand guiding a faltering monarchy, and those who believed a constitutional red line had been crossed, perhaps permanently. But amid the frenzy, Catherine herself remained silent. No speech, no interview, no social post. She moved through meetings like mist there, but never captured. The palace veil held firm, until one unexpected moment tore it open. Yet while the world clamoured for answers, Cathy Rhine remained silent, until a single event cracked open the palace veil. With the eyes of the world burning through palace walls, Catherine stepped onto Windsor's South Terrace, flanked by William and Princess Anne. Her voice was steady, but her words would ignite a firestorm. She wasn't just accepting the role, she was owning it. No palace announcement could have matched the gravity of what came next. The world had waited in suspense, speculating wildly, grasping at silence. And then, without ceremony or spectacle, Catherine appeared, not as a figurehead shielding the monarchy from scandal, but as a woman stepping directly into history's path. Her statement, though brief, was piercing. She spoke of duty not as obligation, but as inheritance passed down not by blood alone, but by spirit. She invoked the Queen with reverence, spoke Diana's name with solemnity, and then did something no one expected. She made it clear that she was ready. Not temporarily, not symbolically, but truly ready. Catherine's words landed with a quiet force. In times of uncertainty, she said, "We are called to serve, not to hide. The responsibility of care is heavy, but it is one I will not defer." That single line sent shockwaves through a nation already teetering on constitutional unease. She wasn't asking for permission, she was declaring intent. William stood beside her, his expression carved from discipline, but beneath it, emotion flickered. It was the look of a man watching history unfold through the woman he loves, and perhaps silently reckoning with what that history might cost them both. And then there was Anne, the Princess Royal, long regarded as the monarchy's anchor. gave a small but unmistakable nod as Catherine finished speaking. A gesture that, while subtle, was far from hollow. It was an endorsement not just of Catherine, but of the direction the crown was quietly turning toward. Royal watchers and political analysts would later call it a silent succession, not one of titles or thrones, but of influence. Anne, who had stood through more royal crises than anyone present, had placed her weight behind the only person who hadn't asked for power, yet now held it with poise. Conspicuously missing was Camilla. Her absence said more than words ever could. And while palace sources insisted she was unavailable due to prior commitments, few believed that version of events. Her exclusion from the event only solidified what had already been whispered. A shift in loyalties had taken place. Not just among advisors or aides, but at the highest level of the crown itself. The moment Catherine confirmed she would oversee both domestic affairs and international diplomatic briefings, until His Majesty resumes full engagements, was the moment speculation transformed into certainty. This was no figurehead arrangement. Catherine was stepping into the heart of governance. She had crossed the threshold, and in doing so, had redefined the role of Princess of Wales forever. But what many missed in her speech was a veiled warning, one that hinted this temporary rule might not be so temporary after all. Why wasn't William granted the powers? Why his wife? Behind the composed exterior, a silent conflict has raged within the Prince of Wales, one that could reshape the monarchy's next chapter forever. What the world saw was quiet. Grace William standing beside Catherine, stoic, unwavering, seemingly supportive of his wife's unexpected elevation. But behind palace walls, a far more complex picture was unfolding. Sources close to the family speak of multiple meetings between William and King Charles in the days leading up to the decree. Meetings not marked by ceremony, but by confrontation. Tensions reportedly rose as the question of succession strategy took a turn that blindsided even the heir apparent. Charles, aware of his son's dedication, didn't question William's loyalty, but he did question his timing. William, in return, challenged his father's urgency. But in a stunning moment of clarity, it was William who suggested the unthinkable, that perhaps Catherine was more ready than he was to lead, at least for now. That admission wasn't an act of humility. It was a confession born of fear. Fear not of duty, but of history repeating itself. At Adelaide Cottage, on the eve of the announcement, William reportedly walked alone through the gardens long after midnight. Staff noted a tension in him, not of anger, but of internal conflict. Later that night, he sat with Catherine in silence, both knowing what the morning would bring. For all the glamour of titles and power, it was a heavy burden they were about to shoulder together, but in very different ways. Catherine would lead, William would support. But the emotional weight of watching his wife take the very place he'd been groomed for since birth by choice left a scar no one could see. Some royal observers argue William's decision was born from strategy, that stepping back now would protect the institution in the long term. Others believe it was an act of love, ensuring that the mistakes made by his father, especially those involving Diana, would never be repeated under his watch. And yet, a quieter truth lingers beneath the surface. William has always struggled with the idea of destiny. His path was never a question of if, only when. But now, as that timeline begins to blur, so does his role. Is he postponing what is inevitable, or subtly reshaping the monarchy's future by handing it, even temporarily, to someone who symbolizes both continuity and change? Those closest to William describe him as a man at war with himself, torn between the weight of tradition and the reality of personal conviction. He knows the spotlight will eventually return to him, but for now he has chosen to redirect it, not out of weakness, but from an understanding that true strength sometimes means stepping aside, even when every part of you has been trained to step forward. And as the family wrestled with personal conflict, a political storm was brewing behind the velvet curtains of the palace. Not everyone welcomed the rise of Catherine. Deep within the Royal Advisory Council, loyalties fractured. Leaked messages, midnight resignations, and whispered accusations would soon reveal the royal family's greatest weakness itself: Beneath the polished exterior of the monarchy, a far more volatile narrative began to unfold, one laced with suspicion, betrayal, and deep-rooted resentment. Within 48 hours of the decree's leak, 2 senior advisors tendered their resignations. Official statements cited health reasons and personal transitions, but insiders told a different story. These departures weren't planned, they were the result of internal rupture. One of them, it would later be suggested, had leaked the sealed decree to the press, enraged by being kept in the dark and appalled. That the heir had been bypassed in favor of the consort. What was meant to be a strategic pivot had detonated into an institutional reckoning. The fractures didn't stop there. Tensions bled into the extended royal family. Beatrice and Eugenie, long positioned as neutral players, were now rumoured to have aligned themselves with Camilla's dwindling faction. Though never vocal, their sudden absence from high-profile events and their refusal to engage with Catherine's aides did not go unnoticed. Palace sources began to whisper of back-channel communications and family group chats that had become eerily silent. Camilla, increasingly isolated in public, appeared to be rallying what remained of her allies in private, and the York sisters, perhaps out of loyalty or perhaps strategic preservation, were quietly standing beside her. Meanwhile, Princess Anne, always a quiet force within the family, stepped into an even more enigmatic role. A private meeting between her and senior military leaders, conducted off-record and outside of protocol, raised more than a few alarms. Some believed she was working to stabilize the monarchy behind the scenes. Others feared she was preparing contingency plans should the current arrangement collapse under public scrutiny. Whatever her motive, one thing was clear: even Anne, the monarchy's most disciplined figure, was operating with uncharacteristic urgency and independence. Amid the chaos, Catherine began exercising her newfound authority with quiet precision. In a move that shocked many, she reportedly denied Camilla access to classified foreign briefings related to upcoming diplomatic talks. The decision, though unprecedented, was justified under the temporary powers granted by the decree. But the optics were devastating. The Queen Consort had been locked out. A message had been sent: Catherine was not a placeholder, she was in charge. The divide deepened. In Parliament and within the Crown's legal circles, murmurs began to rise, whispers of formalising Catherine's role through the establishment of a permanent Regency Council. Supporters claimed it was the logical next step. Critics saw it as a constitutional provocation. But the idea was no longer theoretical. It was gaining traction in rooms where decisions are made and fate is signed, and just when it seemed the dust might settle, the king made one final, unexpected move. A royal courier arrives at BBC headquarters. Minutes later, a pre-recorded message from Charles airs across the nation. Calm, resolute, and heartbreaking, the king reveals the real reason behind his stunning decree and confirms the unthinkable. His reign may be reaching its end. The nation held its breath as the king's voice echoed through living rooms and radio waves. There was no crown upon his head, no grandeur in the background, just a man, speaking plainly as monarch and father. He began with a phrase few expected to hear: "Duty must come before pride." And with that, Charles peeled back the gilded curtain that had long shielded the palace's inner struggles. For years, he said, he had shouldered the responsibilities of the crown with commitment. But age, illness, and introspection had brought him to a crossroads. The monarchy, he declared, must evolve to survive. And evolution required courage, the courage to step aside, even if only for a while. In that moment, the fears of millions crystallized. Charles confirmed what many had speculated but few dared say aloud. He would temporarily withdraw from active engagements, stepping back not in weakness, but in deliberate, measured intent. This was no abdication, but it was no mere sabbatical either. It was a transition, cloaked in uncertainty, shaped by necessity. And then, with a quiet breath, he turned toward the future, not in abstract terms, but in the form of one woman, Catherine. He spoke directly to her, calling her the future's voice of the crown, a phrase now etched in history. He praised her grace under pressure, her clarity of thought, and above all, her devotion not just to family but to country, Even those who had questioned the Princess of Wales's rise felt the weight of those words. The image that followed was not one of unity, but of revelation. As the speech aired, Camilla was seen watching alone from a private wing of Windsor, her expression unreadable. No public reaction, no official statement, just silence louder than any rebuttal. In another part of the castle, Catherine was later seen leaving a private chapel service, her eyes rimmed with tears, her face solemn. Not triumphant, not overwhelmed, simply moved by the gravity of what had just unfolded. And then, the final image, parchment bearing the royal seal, marked in bold ink with the phrase Interim Transition Protocol, a document many believe had been prepared weeks in advance. The stamp of authority had been made, the course set. What began as rumour had now become royal order. The monarchy had entered a new phase not with celebration, but with quiet resolve. As the monarchy reshapes before our eyes, one question remains: was this a brief power transfer, or the quiet coronation of the next queen? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.